Hey fearsome friends, tonight I have some very creepy night shift stories. From ghostly happenings to unwelcome stowaways, these tales will certainly make you think twice about working nights ever again. So sit back, relax, and get cozy, comfy, warm, because it's time to let your nightmares in. So I used to work security in a corporate office during the day shift, and generally there was nothing that really happened outside of regular business. My shift would be 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday to Friday, but we were regularly short-staffed, so we would change who worked weekends every 2 weeks until we found someone to cover it. It's important to mention here that I didn't work nights until this job. Those shifts were always eerily quiet compared to the daytime, and only on rare occasions was anyone else there during the night. If there was someone, it was a cleaner, and they would usually rush to get out early, being paid for the full shift if everything was done. Sometimes the cleaners and I would have a talk and just shoot the breeze for a while. And on this particular night, we were doing just that. The cleaner explained to me that they had felt uncomfortable on the 3rd floor, which I just assumed was a fear of heights thing. But then they told me they thought someone was up there. At that site, I was doing regular site inspections every hour and had to scan tags. The 3rd floor had tags I would normally scan, and I'd already done a few rounds already, but hadn't noticed anyone, so I was obviously confused. The cleaner asked if I would go with them up to the 3rd floor just to feel a little safer, so I figured why not. I mean, I still need to scan those tags anyway. 2 birds, 1 stone and all that. So we got up to the 3rd floor, and it was as dark as can be with only 4 lights on, 1 at each flight of stairs. The cleaner asked me to check the restrooms for them, so I did, and they began cleaning them. It was at this time I began scanning the tags. There was only 4 of them on that floor. Bing, 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 and I was back at the restrooms in less than 2 minutes. When I got back, I spoke to the cleaner about why they'd believed there was someone up there. I just walked the whole floor in 2 minutes, and not a soul was there. They explained to me that all of the cleaners hated being on the 3rd floor at night. They all said there was a shadow man that's always walking around, and you can see it from the corner of your eye. You can never fully see them, but you know for sure he's there. The cleaner said they didn't believe in ghosts, but did think someone was sleeping in the building. They were uncomfortable being alone in an area where someone may be living, so the cleaner finished up with everything and we took the elevator down. They thanked me for walking them through and being around, which was my job, so it wasn't a big deal. Then after all that, my curiosity piqued. I was always spending a little more time on the 3rd floor, and after a few weeks the fun began. Maybe a month had passed of me taking extra slow rounds on the 3rd floor, when I noticed the company had replaced the water fountain with a hands-free one. It had a bottle-filling spout, which I thought was cool, so I started using it to fill my Rambler bottle whilst I walked around. As I walked past it, though, it turned itself on. My first thought was that it was a bad sensor. The problem was, though, it wasn't turning off. Whatever, I thought. Mark it and report it to maintenance. I continued down the hall to where the tag to scan was, and I thought I saw something odd in the cubicle area down there. As I walked down to check it out, I heard something moving around. My first thought was, oh cool, the cleaners are here. But when I turned a corner to the right, all I saw was a pitch-black cubicle area. No way were they in there. I flipped the light and looked around, and yeah, there was no one there. I turned back around and walked back to the elevator, and that's when I saw a dark figure walk down the hallway adjacent to the one I was in, and way at the end of it. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't out of the corner of my eye. It was a full silhouette of a person just casually walking down the hallway. It walked from the right side to the left and straight in the direction of the elevator. The silhouette was tall, at least 6 foot. I'm 5'7", so that's tall to me, and was like a normal person's build. The only exits in the hallway that it walked was to either the stairs or the elevator. To get to them, you must open a magnetic door with a keycard, which makes an audible beeping noise loud enough to be heard during regular work hours. At night, with no one there, the ring echoes, but this time I didn't hear the beep. I rushed down to see who it was, but when I got there, there was no one. This was the only time I saw it, whatever it was, and other times there were loud banging noises with the occasional toilet flushing randomly and lights flickering. It could all be faulty stuff, but the silhouette, that I could never explain. My story is not that scary, but still it weirded me out every night when I was working. I used to work night shifts at this small hotel, which was situated on the outskirts of the town that I lived in. It was an old industrial site, but they had built lots of new stuff there, and there were no longer any factories. The whole area was still a bit shady though, and it got quite dark there as well, so the whole setting was already a bit creepy. Our hotel was small, and staff changing rooms, showers and toilets were situated basically in the basement. I hated to have to use those facilities, as I'd always get this very uneasy feeling every time I went down there. It's hard to explain. It was just this overall uncomfortable feeling. The toilets and showers were in the very back, and to get to the toilet I'd have to go past showers which had shower curtains on them. Every time going past them, I was sure I heard some rustling and weird quiet shuffling noises coming from the showers. Sometimes the water would be running in one of them, even though nobody was there. I had to always open the shower curtains on my way to the toilets, as I hated the fact they were closed, and there could be anything behind them. It was always nerve-wracking to do so. Then I would run to the toilet, be as quick as I could, then run back upstairs. But here's the thing. Every time I would go back downstairs, the curtains would be closed again. It was genuinely creepy down there, and the more time I spent there, the more creepier it got. That feeling of something bad happening if I spent any more time down there was increased. I tried to ask my colleagues about it, but nobody really knew anything about the building. I was certainly not the only one who hated to use the bathroom though. I'm happy I don't work there any longer, and I can do my business in the toilet without rushing. So I do security, and I'm actually writing this at work. Recently in September I changed companies, and I'd started working at this new site that's a factory. It's well over 100 years old, and is infested with rats, because the building next door is a company that rents out dumpsters, swaps them out monthly, and cleans them. So rats, mice, roaches, and other pests find themselves in here regularly. Conveniently though, the owner of the factory has begun to feed and care for the local homeless cats, and had them spayed and neutered. He's built them a cat house that's much like a plywood doghouse, and feeds them daily and gives them water. Important to note here is that there are only 2 cats. Then on top of that, the owner brings his dog to work, who is an absolute sweetheart. Now to the story. Lately I arrive for work at 3 p.m, and my shift begins at 3:30, and by that time I begin locking doors as everyone is leaving. By 7 p.m. I'm alone with all doors locked and the alarm systems on, and from then on my job is to regularly inspect the building. For months everything was uneventful, during my regular shift which was 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. But lately, since I've been doing doubles, odd things have been occurring. Over the last few days, I noticed that the cats were spending a lot more time outside in the cold weather during the night, and the weather has reached as low as 7 degrees at times. Right now it's very cold, but they don't come in. If they do, they only stay in a room that's near the exit, and I've only one lone rat too. I then started hearing radios playing music in areas where I had previously walked, but I chalked this up to them maybe having an alarm which was to play the radio, albeit at bizarre times like 1:48 a.m. I would turn the volume down but keep the radio on, and usually I wouldn't hear it again. Lights in the building have also been behaving oddly. One ended up being replaced in its entirety and was rewired, but it's still not right. What I keep in mind, though, is that the building is over 100 years old, so there's bound to be some weirdness going on with the electrical wiring. Tonight, however, something odd happened that I don't know how to explain. At around 3 a.m., when I was drinking a Coca-Cola to stay awake, I heard the delivery bell ring. I set down my drink at my post, which is just a chair and a table by the alarm system, and shut off the door alarms. I brought in the guy who does the deliveries and stood with him, which is required by my post orders, and was simple, because we stand in direct sight of the only door that could be entered. After he left, I activated the door alarms again and returned to my post around 3:45 a.m. The only issue now was my Coke was gone. It had completely disappeared. I searched for a while and found no trace of it, and gave it no more thought. About 10 minutes later, I heard the sound of someone clocking in, so I immediately stood up to greet the person who I believed was there. The strange thing was, though, is that there was no one there. I had no doubt that I'd heard the clock-in bell, as it's literally a bell, like the round ones that have a hammer in it. When someone clocks in, it makes a loud ring noise, as bells do. You can hear it at the other side of the building. The only things that should have been in the building, other than me, are rats and cats, as the dog leaves with his owner. The alarms were on, so why didn't they go off when someone came in? I checked around, and at about 4:30 a.m. shut off the alarms, as an employee entered and asked him if he was the only one here. I asked him if he'd seen any other cars and told him what had been happening. He laughed, though, and called it the apparition. I never found the missing drink, or who first clocked in, and I'm more angry than scared. I want my Coca-Cola. Now, I very rarely feel genuinely uncomfortable at work. When I first started, I was afraid because I had never worked nights before, and the building is old. But now I feel very safe. Mark is kind of like a guardian who shows up on boring nights to cheer us up. This is pretty much how I started taking comfort in Mark, rather than being afraid of him. So I had a co-worker who had told me multiple times that when she was depressed, she wanted to harm others and not herself. She was one of those people who enjoyed theatrics and drama, so usually I brushed it off. But one night she was acting odd. She was talking about how her mum and sisters are diagnosed schizophrenics, and how she felt like any day now she could have her mental break to have it as well. Now, I don't know how that diagnosis works. I'm just repeating what she'd said to me. And she kept popping out of nowhere, saying over and over how she was going to kill the next person who annoyed her. I kept looking at the entrance of any door she exited through, so I could watch her come back in, and I refused to let her be behind me at any time. I laughed at this, but inside I was very afraid. Now, there are only 2 rules to work nights at my job. 1, don't fall asleep, and 2, don't work alone. I couldn't leave either because I needed this job. For the whole night, Mark was very active. Things were falling off shelves and walls, or I was hearing footsteps or someone on the stairs. I was so afraid of my co-worker at this point, though, that I couldn't be afraid of the noises. I started to notice then that every time she made me feel unsafe, I would hear Mark shortly after. I also noticed that she was afraid, and was feeling a bad energy that night from Mark. Later, after she'd left to go be a stay-at-home mum, Mark hasn't made me feel unsafe since. I fully believe that Mark was just as afraid of her hurting me that night as I was. I think he wanted to distract her. I don't think she would have killed me, but she definitely wasn't in her right mind that night, and often bragged about her dreams to physically harm people. I've been friends with people in the past who like to be edgy and talk about fighting or violence, but this was definitely more than just talk that night. Mark hasn't made me feel uncomfortable since. For clarification, this is my mum's story from one of her part-time jobs in the early 90s, so this happened a long time ago. During 1990 to 1991, my mum started working at a group home as a youth worker doing counselling and support work. For context, this home was in a residential area not too far from the local hospital police station downtown core, and this home had 3 floors. About 8 different girls who lived on the 2nd floor, and an attic above. The main floor was where the office and kitchen area was, and at the time the agency didn't have strict regulations, so my mum would be working night shifts by herself and having to manage all of these kids alone. One night my mum began her shift and was made aware of some really creepy information. Both the home supervisor and the kids who lived there reported weird smells at night, sounds from the attic, and food going missing during the day. Keep in mind at the time, nobody was allowed up there or stayed there, and my mum would have to do half-hour checks to ensure all doors were locked. However, during her shifts, she didn't notice any problems, so thankfully for her, none of the weird events took place on her specific shifts. As events kept being reported though, they then called in maintenance workers. When maintenance went around to check the property, they noticed that one of the windows on the 3rd floor to a room which was locked had been broken. The room wasn't accessible from the inside of the house, so nobody knew how this could have happened. Unfortunately though, that room had access to the attic, so the maintenance workers went up to check it out and found various things: food wrappers, clothing, and even things from residents' bedrooms. The room that was locked off from the inside of the house was able to be opened from the other side, meaning that at some point, throughout night or day shifts, the stowaway was walking inside the home and no one knew. They would have had to have come down when the residents were either being taken to school, were asleep, or at appointments, but they also were able to view the schedule board in the office. They would have known when staff were coming and going, and any days when residents would be gone. During the time that the stowaway had occupied the attic, there were reports from other staff members about them feeling as though they were being watched. Eventually the maintenance workers fixed the windows, the fridge was locked, and security cameras were installed, and there weren't any issues after that. I'm 30 years old and I work in a bakery on night shifts, as it's open on weekend nights. It's quite close to a big club, and a lot of people stop by before going home. I'm a girl, so my boss tries to never leave me alone at night. But last Friday his wife called him as there was an emergency, so I found myself on my own around 3 a.m. It was very quiet. I guess that the club was closed, so a very few people walked in, and I was in the back of the shop working on a cake we were to deliver in the morning, when I heard the doorbell ring. I quickly went out to the shop front, but nobody was there. The door doesn't close properly if you don't push it hard enough, and it looked like it had been moved slightly, like someone had just come in. But even looking out through the big glass window on the street, nobody was in sight. There was a parking lot and a bar in front of the shop, which is closed at night, but not even a car was there. I started feeling a bit uneasy, but I thought maybe someone was pranking or trying to scare me. I went back to working on the cake, and after half an hour or so, I heard the doorbell again. This time I looked on the shop's security cameras, and nobody was there again. So I ran to the back door, trying to reach the parking lot from the right side to see if someone was hiding there to prank me. but there was no one. I walked the whole parking lot. I looked around the bar, behind the shop, everywhere, and nothing. I decided to have a smoke just to calm my nerves, when I suddenly noticed the silence. There were no dogs barking, no cars passing by in the street out the front of the shop, not a sound at all. Everything was just too quiet and still. There was a light mist in the air too, and it was quite dark, because just one of the streetlights was working. At this point I was totally freaking out, and felt like I was in a totally detached reality or a different dimension, with someone watching me. I don't really know how to explain it. I forgot about the smoke and I went back inside, closing all the doors of the shop. I didn't care what my boss would think. I was too scared. Then I tried to finish the cake. Nothing more happened, but at 6 a.m. my boss arrived back, and I explained to him why I'd kept the shop closed. He told me that something similar had happened to a girl that did the night shift before I'd worked there, and that this is the reason why she doesn't work there anymore. I totally understand why she left too. I always loved working at night, but I feel uneasy about being alone there again. Last Saturday and yesterday everything was normal, but I wasn't alone. I hope that never happens again. So my husband works shifts, and one morning around 5 a.m, he had just left our bungalow to walk to the bus stop to catch the first of 2 buses to work. Being summer, it was very bright for the time of morning, and he told me he was just collecting his thoughts, thinking about the tasks he had to do that day, and the list of groceries that I'd asked him to get, when from above and a little way off, he heard a rustling of leaves from a tree behind a wall of a garden. Thinking it was a squirrel, he looked up, and he told me he thought he was seeing things. What he said he saw was a small black-bodied, sleek figure walking or running on 4 skinny legs resembling a monkey, with a long, rat-like tail. It looked like the head was round with pointed ears either side of it. My husband couldn't see the creature's facial features though, as it moved with extreme speed. And when it hit the ground, it scurried away from him. But he said he swore he saw what he thought was a wing, in the brief time he saw the creature airborne, which appeared to be pinned back to the side of the creature's body on the nearest side to him. Now my husband is practical, a no-nonsense man who is somewhat skeptical about the supernatural and paranormal, although doesn't disbelieve altogether, so he was slightly reluctant to tell me in case I would think he was having me on. We discussed the incident that night when he got home, as he had already texted me about it earlier, and I was intrigued. I did ask my husband if it could have been a large bat, and on talking about it and thinking it through properly, we concluded it couldn't have been a bat, as the creature that my husband saw had 4 legs and a rat's tail. We walk that route all the time to get out to the estate and to the shops, and we've never seen a creature like that before. We are both natives to London, and we're unaware of such a creature even existing, so we're still trying to work out what it could have been. Hey, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed my video, and if you did, could you please give me virtual hugs by subscribing and clicking that notifications button. I also have a Patreon page and YouTube channel membership if you'd like to support me further. Thank you again for being here. Keep being creepy.